to have you aboard. It's so nice to see you, and very welcome to, as I say, Anna Maria, and to Brenda. And welcome Penny, who's come across as well. Lovely to have you.
Thank you.
We'll just give it a few more minutes before we sort of start officially. Yeah. I'll be putting my glasses on and off occasionally, but yeah, we're all ready and we're all set. There were quite a few people that registered. We had a little bit of an issue with LinkedIn and the registration, and there were a number of people who registered from New Zealand, but I think that's going to be a bit late for them. So we'll see if they join us. But nonetheless, great to have Penny, Anna Maria, and Brenda so far. We'll give it another minute or two and then we'll kick off.
Hello, I'm just in a Zoom meeting, so I can't talk now. Is it urgent? I had a missed call from you. Okay.
Hi, Pen. Can you just put your audio off?
Oh, okay, perfect. Yes.
We'll give it another minute and then we'll start. Okay, I think let's give it a cracking start, and we'll welcome everyone that's here and those that come along. I'm not going to especially welcome them, but Francis, can I ask you just to send them a quick welcome message when they do register? Because there were quite a few just in the last while that I got emails about that they'd actually registered for or to participate and come join us. So thank you so much. Anna-Marie, if you'd put your camera on, and Penny, if you'd put your camera on, that'd be great so we can see you. And Brenda, I can see a picture of you, but it'd be great to have you there as well, just so that I can see you. And just as a courtesy to the other participants, so they see the people that are present and can relate to them. I'm going to start by saying that this journey for me has come full circle. And what I mean by that is I started in the Eastern Cape here in South Africa, in the middle of nowhere in the Drakensberg Mountains. And my first journey was into the army. From then, I farmed. From then, I coached tennis in America, and that's bottom left. And then I traveled quite a bit. I went to Australia, in fact, Tasmania for over 10 years. I lived in Melbourne for 4 years, and then New Zealand for 7 years. And now find myself back after a short stint in Portugal and Spain in South Africa, which has been a fascinating journey with me. But one of the things that stuck out for me incredibly were all the challenges that I faced when I was starting new roles wherever I was in the world. And like many, many people, the one big question that everyone is afraid to ask, and that is, am I capable of leading effectively? Am I capable of doing what I've actually set myself up to do and get engaged in and do? And I realized that this is actually a universal question. It's not one that I simply just had myself. And I'm going to go back to the top left slide, or the top left picture on this particular slide. And that is where my whole journey started. And I realized then that it all comes down to how effectively you actually get embedded and trained in an organization from the word go. Now, the army is not the most, one back, please, Francis, the one back from that. The army is not the most hospitable place to be welcomed into, but honestly, that is where I felt that I'd learned my greatest lessons. And in retrospect, I've realized too, if you can go back one more slide, Francis, the beginning slide, the first slide. The thing that I've realized since then is that throughout my career, I've realized that things or events are really structured around the seasons and the quarters that we have in a year. So the first 90 days, for example, in the army was around basic training and learning to plan and learning to adapt to a new environment. You'll see that my dog tags on the bottom there, which I remember obviously very well because I wore that for a long time, were sort of a fundamental symbol of where it all started. And my name tag in the sort of the gold lettering is where it sort of ended in my army career, because by then you'd achieved certain things and you were wearing the fancy uniform. But everything boiled down to a conversation that I had in my very earliest days that I was immensely impressed by and that impressed upon me. I had a new colonel that came into our base, and he'd finished staff officer's course. His name was Louis Kotze. He eventually went on to become a general. And he went to every single young officer, young leader in the army unit. And I'm pretty sure he went to everyone else as well, in the sense that he sat down next to each person in the army unit and he asked a couple of questions. And he said, what do you actually do and why do you do it? And as a young officer, I was just astonished that the colonel was in my office asking me what I do and why I do things. And it just struck me that he was really interested in what I was doing, why I was doing it. And the question after that was, how could we do things better? Or how could you do things better? And that really stuck with me for the rest of my life. So much so that during COVID, like, I won't say how many years, but it was probably close to 40 years later, with, the benefit of the internet. I managed to track him down. He's obviously retired. And I phoned him and I shared with him something that I'd been wanting, to tell him throughout my whole life. And really what I wanted to say was, what significant impact his leadership had on my career, which was, something I really felt was very personal. And I wasn't quite sure how he was going to respond to that. Anyway, he said something to me in Afrikaans, which some people may understand here, and that is that jy trek vandag 'n riem onder my hart, which means that you've really made me very joyful and happy, telling me this story about how I impacted you, in our early days. So I think that coming back to leadership and asking yourself, am I capable of leading effectively, is something that everyone has. And I feel that I have a responsibility now to, young graduates, mid-career people, and even CEOs to share my experiences in my roles throughout my career. I've got the time to do it. I'm pretty isolated. I'm in the middle of nowhere in South Africa, and I love elevating people to their fullest potential. That is sort of my key word around what I'd like to do. And I think that these transitions can be extremely traumatic, especially if you're of another culture, especially if you're going from one country to another, and especially if you haven't been in a leadership position before, which is why I'm going to quickly whiz through these. I'll probably be another 20 minutes max, and we will share the journey of these transitions and hopefully help you in your role as a manager or an HR manager or a team link or a team member, elevate the people around you in such a way that they benefit and actually come back to you one day and thank you for the impact that you had on their careers. Can you go to the next slide, please, Francis? So this is where I live, and many people have asked me, what on earth have you done? You've gone all around the world. You've lived in Australia, New Zealand, Tasmania, Portugal, and you've come back to South Africa. Why have you ever done that? Have you got rocks in your head? No, I haven't. I honestly feel in a time where South Africa is going through great challenges that now's the time to actually be here and to help people as much as I possibly can. And I wasn't going to shy away from the responsibility of helping my country develop leaders here. But at the same time, I really enjoyed my international exposure, and that's what I'd love to continue to do, is to have that connection with people around the world, which I really enjoy. So the next slide is really just about summarizing exactly what we would like to do with our program, and that is to provide critical success strategies for new leaders. And it's a very crucial time, but it isn't actually only 90 days that has impact on any organization. It actually extends further than that. So if you have a look at the next slide, I'll explain why I say that. And that is because if you actually realize, and this is probably a little table or a graph that has had the biggest impact on me in all my roles, and that was how quickly you can break even or deliver value to the organization that you are part of. Now, if you look along the straight line, that axis is the months that you are in any organization. On the left is your contribution to the organization. The first 3 months, you're actually consuming value. And that is where you're learning. That is where you're assessing the situation, where you are even doubting your own leadership skills and understanding what your role is in the organization. That is learning your values, or learning the organization's values, and and actually adapting to them, and allowing your values to combine with the values of that organization, or to synergize with the organizational values. That is where you are facing some huge challenges around yourself, your team members, and the organization as a whole. But that is where you can too make the greatest impact, is in those first 90 days. So you'll see there that only after 3 months have you stopped actually consuming value, and the following 3 months is you actually making up for the value that you've consumed in the first 3 months. Now, break-even point is actually only at 6 months. So your contribution to the organization in value is actually nil at that stage after 6 months. And in some organizations, that may take you even longer. My challenge to yourselves as HR managers or leaders or managers is, how can we assist you in shortening that 3-month period and actually bringing that six-month period closer to the 5 and to the 4, in getting your people to settle in really comfortably and to be accomplished leaders in your organizations and recognized as such as quickly as possible. So that brings me to my next slide. And what we have here is really just an understanding of why accelerated leadership transitions are so important. At a very senior level, be it a board chair or a CEO or MD of a company, the importance of setting the tone and setting the strategy for the company will soon determine the trajectory of your company, for better or worse, very, very quickly. So it's super important for senior people to actually have in place a very distinct plan. I'll give you an example. In one of my roles before, not only was the board chair was there, a changeover in board chairman, but the CEO of the organization was also being rather messily being replaced. And my program, that was regarded as an extremely transformational program for the organization, relied very heavily on me being engaged with the CEO and the board chairman all the time. In fact, we had weekly meetings. I had a weekly meeting with the board chair and the CEO, which is very, very unusual in pretty much 90% of organizations, I would say. And essentially what happened is the strategic plan that was designed by the incoming CEO wasn't getting the full support of the board either, which made my role very, very difficult. So the first year, whilst I enjoyed working in the organization, was extremely challenging, dealing with the politics and the tone of the organization. And I found that a great big challenge. The other thing is that I'd moved interstate, not interstate, from one country to another to take on this role. And I've read up that accepting a new role in a new country, where you're uprooting from one sort of social environment to a completely different one, can be one of the most challenging life experiences, even surpassing bereavement or divorce or health issues. And that, too, I can honestly say, was a great, great challenge. So making that much easier for people of different nationalities, of different cultures. I'm thinking now of Asian people coming to the UK, or, Southeast Asian, Indian folks coming to Australia and New Zealand, or the cultural shift and the cultural change there is something that we really need to be cognitive of. And African folks or South Africans, Nigerians going to the UK or to America, that change in culture is a very high stakes bet that one is actually engaging in. So when the transition is successful, the organization will absolutely thrive. But if not, the opposite is true. So we have to be aware of the risks involved, and that nearly 50% of leadership transitions fail within 2 years. 50% of leadership transitions fail. And when that transition fails, it extends the vacuum that failure has made by a further probably 6 to 10 months while you replace the person who's failed in the organization. And I think the most important thing that we need to understand during that time is that your competitors are actually forging ahead during that time. So you mustn't think of it only as a risk inside or within the organization. You must think of it as a strategic risk in your business, because your competitors will absolutely be aware that you are going through some internal turmoil through leadership changes or restructuring or whatever. And here too, I can say that the experience I had was where one wouldn't actually do as much as you could within the organization to train your staff, to prepare your staff, to actually settle your staff in such a way that they are ready when the transition eventually occurs. So on the next slide, I'll quickly just point out exactly who this is aimed at. I'm aiming this transition at very busy HR managers or people in culture people. I'm aiming this at CEOs and mid-career managers who need to focus on their roles and who need to have someone in their new leader appointments life to be able to teach them the soft skills, teach them the more delicate skills that they may not have at all. You may have, for example, an engineer who's never been in a leadership position before, who's been appointed to be a leader of his peers and hasn't got a clue on how really to do that. They think that because he's a good guy or girl and has been there for a while, that they're the suitable leader for this organization. And that's where these skills would come in very handy to make sure that they settle in well and that they've actually got a distinct plan on how they're going to go through this transition into their new leadership role. In the next slide, I will very briefly give you the benefits of the intentional planning. And that's the word there, is that the transition needs to be absolutely intentional. It needs to be signed off by the CEO or the MD of the organization to ensure that it takes a little bit of a load off them, the HR, the MD, or if it's a new director or a new head of a division in your organization, so that you can ensure that there's a smooth transition, there's faster integration, and that you basically are not rocking the whole boat when you are getting a new leader. Now, that's not to say at all that you are trying to diminish the new leader's energy and innovation and personality and all of that. You're really just focusing on making that impact even greater in a more structured, purposeful way. I guarantee you that when a graduate leaves university, they don't have the skills or the tools or the benefit of a planned integration into their new organization. And this is where I believe it would be very worthwhile to have a look at having someone come in and assist their transition into new leadership. In my next slide, what I'll show you there is a very brief overview of what is actually included in the process. If you can quickly get to that one, Frank says. There we go. So it's really me providing the new leader with a bit of a framework to work from. Essentially, when people ask me, they say, what do you actually do? Well, it boils down to me asking hundreds and hundreds of questions. And the questions actually elicit the answers from the new leaders. I'm not saying that I've got all the answers, but certainly I give them this framework that you're looking there at now, of helping people assess the right things in the organization. Where is the organization right now? Is it as successful and as glossy as their website or their brochures suggest, or not? It's assessing the health of the organization, assessing the department or the area that they are working in, assessing their staff, assessing the leader, and building those relationships with people in the organization. And I don't just mean the people in the organization. I mean having conversations with your clients, your customers, your suppliers, having conversations that will make an impact on them getting to know you and you actually determining what their challenges are. One of the most revealing conversations that you can have with one of your seniors is to ask them, or your boss, let's call them, is to ask them what their greatest challenges are. What are your greatest challenges? How can I help you in my position overcome your challenges? How can I make your job easier? And that too is something you can teach your team to do, to ask one another, how can I make your job easier? What can I do to help you? And I can guarantee you it'll be returned in spades if you can teach your team to ask that question of one another. And then too, when I talk about building key relationships, there are the hidden leaders in any organization, or the invisible leaders, shall I call them that? People that don't necessarily carry a title or key role. They are very likely to be people that have been around for a long, long time, that know some of the institutional history, that can introduce you to some of the founding fathers of the organization that you work with, let's say, remembering that, I worked in universities and independent schools, where it was really helpful for me to have good relationships with all of them and to be a figure within the organization that they could still come to when they had ideas or a little bit of insight into a situation that could have either avoided, a mishap or a bit of a disaster or not, and it was people, the invisible people in the organization, that were really important to have conversations. I'll give another quick example. We used to have really important capital fundraising events where they were extremely intimate, in the sense that the lunch was timed for exactly 45 minutes, and every minute in that 45 minutes was accounted for. Someone had to say something or do something throughout that period. And we actually even trained the waiter that used to come in and serve to be aware of when they had to come in, because it was going to be really unprofessional of us to get that person in the room when we were having a very delicate part of the conversation. So, and the importance of this too was that, we could raise between $250,000, $500,000 at one of these events, which was a significant boost to our organization. And I wanted them to really feel part of the team. And afterwards, when we had wins, we would celebrate with everybody in the team that participated in these successful presentations, let's call them. The next slide is the ability of a new leader to understand that it's not just about leadership and management. You actually have been hired because of your expertise. Your expertise, let's say, in selling homes or in actually raising money or doing sales or doing the marketing or doing operations or doing the finance. Your role in that is very, very important. So you can't abdicate some of the actual reason why you were hired, and that is to actually share your expertise, your experience, and do the work that you actually had to do. So, for example, I had my own list of clients that I had to call on, that I had to service, that I had to see. And yes, they were actually very important because they were the 20% of the people that were supporting us with 80% of the funding. So it was really important that I helped facilitate those meetings, those gatherings. And in many instances, the people that I was dealing with were once again the board chair and the CEO, which was always a challenge, getting them into your diary so you could fly to Melbourne or Sydney or London to meet up with one person. It was always a bit of a challenge. In the next slide, and I'm going to end off very shortly, is if you flick through, is really just some of the implementation strategies that I would share with the leaders. And week by week, what we do is during the 12 weeks, is we have a weekly meeting, we have a weekly challenge, and we also have one-to-one call-ins with the leaders that would be part of our program. And the purpose of that is to actually wean them from myself and the program as quickly as possible. Once they are very well settled in and they are going ahead, they would naturally sort of be weaned from the program. In the next slide, I've now got just a few minutes to give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you may have so far. And if there's anything that you haven't understood about what I've said, please join me and ask any questions, and I can see if I can answer that for you. So just unmute yourself. And if there are no questions, that's perfectly fine as well. So all good? Okay, so let's just go on to the last one. Thank Francis, just onto the last slide. What I'd like to just end off by saying there is that I'm very proud that in my career, I can think of 3 instances where my successor in my role, they were all directorships of fundraising programs for large organizations. My successor in 3 instances was actually my assistant. So we had trained one another to be so efficient that we achieved such a great team that it actually held on to the continuity that we had, or the momentum was continued from what we had built up together. So I'm very proud to say that. And I think that kind of internal strength and goodness that we'd established in our programs was perpetuated through the programs that we'd started. And I was extremely grateful that I was able to facilitate that. Lastly, what I'm going to just say is thank you to the people that have come and joined us today. Today is the first of 12 sessions that I'm going to be doing on slightly different topics every time. But yeah, I just want to acknowledge those that came along. It's always a big challenge to start a program, but it's great fun, and I'm very excited about where we're going and what we're going to do. So we'll be sending these videos to the people that weren't able to make it. And I'm also going to, if people are interested, to have further discussions. You know, I'd entertain the idea of flicking us email so that we can perhaps set up any training programs. And all the detail in this is actually in a very simple Google Doc where I can send people the details around the program, what the costs are, and so on. So that's my invitation for those of you that are still here to take me up on and give me some feedback too, and I'd be most grateful. So thank you so much, Anna Maria and Penny, for staying so long. I do appreciate your time, and I think my time's up. So thank you so much. Half an hour on the dot. So I'll say cheers there. And if anyone does want to stay a little bit longer and ask me a question, you're very welcome to. There we go. Thanks, Frances. Thank you so much. You can stop recording now.